The hovercraft skimmed above the phosphorescent moss that carpeted the forest floor of Elysia Prime. Aria's son leaned forward in her seat, the blue glow of the instrument panel reflecting off her determined face. The craft's stabilizers fought against the increasing winds that signaled the approach of another plasma storm, a common occurrence in this section of the climate-altered forest that bordered the research outpost. "We're approaching the coordinates," said Xanor, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. The engineer's usually calm demeanor had given way to a nervous energy that manifested in the constant adjustment of his atmospheric protection suit. "Atmospheric disturbances are getting worse. We should be prepared for a hard landing." Aria nodded, her mind already racing through the medical supplies she'd brought along. The emergency signal had been urgent. An apex drake, one of the most magnificent and dangerous creatures of Elysia Prime, had been spotted injured near the perimeter sensors. The outpost's automatic defense protocols had identified the creature as a threat, but, thanks to the newly implemented wildlife preservation directives, had not neutralized it. Instead, the system had sent an alert for xenobiological assistance. That's where Aria came in. As one of the Galactic Alliance's foremost xenofauna biologists, she specialized in the treatment and study of alien wildlife, particularly the apex predators that dominated the ecological hierarchy of frontier worlds like Elysia Prime. Scans show a large heat signature approximately 200 meters northeast of our position. Thrax announced from the rear of the craft. The Thraxan warrior's chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the craft's interior lights. His multiple compound eyes were fixed on the holographic display, tracking the movements of the injured creature. "It is stationary, but still showing life signs." Aria checked her medical kit one last time. "Set us down as close as you safely can. Zane, Thrax, you'll need to establish a security perimeter. I don't want any surprises while I'm working." "The Drake will be surprise enough," Thrax replied, the clicking mandibles that framed his face betraying his species' equivalent of nervous humor. "Apex drakes are revered among my people. To approach one, even an injured one, is to court death, or to court a new understanding," Aria countered, her voice soft but firm. It was this philosophy that had guided her through 12 years of xenobiology fieldwork across 17 different worlds, where others saw monsters. She saw marvels, living puzzles of evolutionary brilliance that deserved respect and, when needed, compassion. The hovercraft descended through a clearing in the dense canopy, settling atop a patch of relatively flat ground. As the engines powered down, the sounds of the forest enveloped them, the clicking of nocturnal insects, the distant calls of arboreal mammals, and a new sound that sent chills down Aria's spine, the labored breathing of something very large and very much in pain. "Power signatures approximately 80 meters ahead," Zane whispered, checking his scanner. "And not just biological. I'm picking up traces of refined metals and energy emissions." Aria's brow furrowed. "Poachers?" "It would appear so," Thrax confirmed, unslinging the sonic disruptor from his back. The non-lethal weapon was standard issue for wildlife management teams, capable of incapacitating most creatures without permanent harm. The metal signature matches components often used in illegal hunting technology. Aria felt her jaw tighten. The illicit trade in exotic creature parts was a plague across the galaxy, driven by the obscene profits to be made selling to collectors and black market medicine manufacturers. Despite the Galactic Alliance's strict regulations, poachers continued to ravage frontier worlds, often leaving behind wounded animals too damaged to be of value, but not dead enough to end their suffering. "Let's move," she said, securing her medical scanner to her belt. "Quietly." The forest floor squelched beneath their boots as they made their way toward the Drake's position. Bioluminescent fungi provided islands of blue-green light in the deepening twilight, illuminating their path while casting strange, elongated shadows that seemed to dance with each step. The air grew thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and the distinctive ozone smell that preceded a plasma storm. "We have maybe 30 minutes before the storm hits," Zane murmured. his eyes flicking between his environmental scanner and the darkening sky visible through gaps in the canopy. After that, communication with the outpost will be impossible until it passes. Arya acknowledged this with a nod, but kept moving forward. Her focus had narrowed to the mission at hand: reach the Drake, assess its injuries, and provide treatment if possible. Everything else, including the looming storm, was secondary. They had covered perhaps 60 meters when Thrax suddenly raised a clawed hand, signaling them to stop. His compound eyes swept the surrounding forest, his antennae twitching as they sampled the air. "We are not alone," he whispered. No sooner had the words left his mandibles than a flash of movement erupted from the undergrowth to their right. A sleek, predatory form launched itself at Zane, knocking him to the ground. The creature, a juvenile forest stalker with iridescent scales and wickedly curved claws, hissed as it positioned itself for a killing strike. Thrax moved with the fluid grace that made his species feared warriors throughout the galaxy. The sonic disruptor hummed to life in his hands, emitting a precise pulse that caught the stalker mid-lunge. The creature convulsed momentarily before collapsing in an unconscious heap beside the shaken engineer. "Thanks," Zane gasped, scrambling back to his feet. "I didn't even see it coming." "The injured Drake has disturbed the forest's predator-prey dynamics," Arya explained, helping Zane brush off the forest debris that clung to his suit. "Smaller predators are being displaced from their usual hunting grounds. We need to be more careful." As if to emphasize her point, a chorus of calls erupted from the surrounding forest, the territorial challenges of displaced predators sensing intruders in their newly claimed domains. The sounds, ranging from high-pitched shrieks to rumbling growls, created a discordant symphony that set Arya's nerves on edge. "We should hurry," she said, checking the medical scanner again. "The Drake's biosigns are weakening." They pressed on, moving more cautiously now, with Thrax scanning continuously for threats. The forest grew denser, the trees taller and more ancient, their trunks wrapped in spiraling patterns of glowing lichen. Here, the moss beneath their feet gave way to bare soil marked by massive, three-toed footprints, the unmistakable spoor of an apex drake. "These tracks are fresh," Thrax observed, kneeling to examine one particularly clear impression. "Less than an hour old. And look," he pointed to a dark stain at the edge of the footprint. "Blood." Arya crouched beside him, activating her sample analyzer. She touched the stain with a sterile collector, watching as the device processed the genetic material. "Confirmed apex drake hemoglobin," she said, reading the results. "High concentration of stress hormones and inflammatory markers. Whatever happened to it? It's in significant pain." A sudden, bone-rattling roar shook the forest around them. Birds erupted from the canopy in panicked clouds, and the smaller creatures that had been stalking their progress scattered into the underbrush. The sound was primal, a mixture of pain and fury that seemed to vibrate through Arya's very bones. "I believe we have found our patient," Thrax said dryly. They moved forward more quickly now, guided by the continuing sounds of distress. The trees thinned, revealing a small clearing dominated by a massive, partially fallen tree, and there, trapped against the fallen trunk, was one of the most magnificent creatures Arya had ever seen. The apex drake towered nearly 8 meters tall, even in its hunched, defensive posture. Its body was covered in overlapping scales that shifted from deep crimson along its spine to burnished gold on its underbelly. 2 massive wings, currently folded tight against its body, bore the iridescent membrane patterns that had earned these creatures their nickname, plasma dragons. But it was the drake's head that commanded attention, elongated and crowned with a sweeping crest of keratinous spines, with eyes that burned like twin stars in the gathering dusk. Those eyes now fixed on the 3 intruders, narrowing in a mixture of pain and suspicion. The drake's nostrils flared, and Arya could immediately see the problem. Embedded deep within the left nostril was what appeared to be a metal spike or rivet, an unnatural intrusion into the creature's sensitive respiratory system. Some kind of tracking or control device, Zane whispered, scanning the object from a safe distance. Definitely poacher technology, probably designed to incapacitate by disrupting the creature's plasma sense. Arya nodded grimly. Apex drakes navigated partly through an organ that detected natural plasma flows in Elysia Prime's atmosphere. Disrupting this sense would be like blinding a human, disorienting and terrifying. "Can you determine if there are any other devices?" she asked, never taking her eyes off the massive creature. Zane expanded his scan. "Nothing active that I can detect. They must have abandoned the attempt when the drake fought back." The drake snorted, sending a small shower of sparks from its nostrils, a defense mechanism triggered by pain and stress. It took an unsteady step back, its tail lashing against the fallen tree trunk with enough force to send splinters flying. "It's weakening," Arya observed. "The device must be preventing it from properly regulating its plasma reserves. If we don't remove it soon, the drake could suffer permanent neurological damage." "And how exactly do you propose we remove a metal spike from the nostril of an 8-meter-tall living furnace?" Zane asked, voicing the practical concern that hung between them. Before Arya could answer, Thrax's communication device chirped. The Thraxon activated it, projecting a small holographic display that showed the weather patterns moving toward their position. "The plasma storm has accelerated," he reported. "Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. We must make a decision quickly." Arya took a deep breath, weighing their options. The drake was too large to transport, even if they had brought a suitable vehicle. Sedating such a massive creature would require doses she simply hadn't brought. Assuming the creature's unique physiology would even respond to standard sedatives, that left only one viable approach. "I'm going to try to gain its trust," she said, already reaching for the specialized equipment in her medical kit. "Arya, that's insane," Zane protested. "That thing could incinerate you with a single breath." "If it wanted to do that, it would have already tried," she countered. "Look at its posture. It's defensive, not aggressive. It's in pain and confused. But it hasn't attacked us despite having multiple opportunities." Thrax studied the drake with his compound eyes, taking in details that would be invisible to human perception. "The xenobiologist may be correct. Its plasma sacs are not fully inflated, which would be the case if it were preparing to attack. It appears to be waiting." "Waiting for what?" Zane asked. "For help, perhaps," Arya suggested, securing a flexible bioscanner to her forearm. "These are intelligent creatures, Zane, far more so than Alliance scientists give them credit for. The Thraxan people have known this for centuries." Thrax clicked his mandibles in agreement. "The ancient texts speak of drakes that would form symbiotic relationships with my ancestors. It is said that those who earned a drake's trust gain protectors for life." Arya activated the biofeedback system that would allow her to monitor the drake's vital signs in real time. "Keep your disruptors ready, but do not fire unless I give the signal. Under no circumstances are you two's lethal force." "Arya," Zane began, but she silenced him with a raised hand. "This is what I do. Zane, trust me." With that, she stepped forward into the clearing, her movements slow and deliberate. The drake's massive head swung toward her, those plasma-bright eyes tracking her every move. Arya kept her hands visible, palms forward in what she hoped would be recognized as a non-threatening gesture across species. "Hello. Beautiful," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the strengthening winds. "I know you're hurting. I can see that thing in your nose. It doesn't belong there, does it?" The drake snorted again, more sparks flying, but it didn't retreat further. Encouraged, Arya took another careful step forward. "I'm going to help you, if you'll let me. I just need to get close enough to take a better look." She reached slowly into her pocket and removed a small, transparent container filled with a viscous blue substance. The bioattractant was derived from the same moss that covered much of the forest floor, a favorite food source for many of Elysia Prime's herbivores, including juvenile apex drakes. Opening the container, Arya allowed the pungent, sweet aroma to waft toward the creature. The drake's nostrils flared again, this time in interest rather than aggression. It lowered its head slightly, curiosity momentarily overriding caution. "That's it," Arya encouraged, taking another step. "Just a little closer." The drake extended its neck, bringing its massive head down to a height where Arya could now clearly see the metal object protruding from its nostril. It was indeed a rivet of some kind, with a pulsing light at its base that suggested active technology rather than a simple physical injury. "I can see it clearly now," she called back to Zane without turning. "Definitely some kind of control device. The light is pulsing in a pattern consistent with neural disruption." "Can you remove it safely?" Zane asked, his voice tight with tension. Arya studied the device, noting how it had been driven deep into the sensitive tissues. "Yes, but it's going to hurt. I'll need the micro-forceps and the plasma-resistant gloves." Thrax approached cautiously, the requested items extended in his clawed hand. The drake's eyes flicked to the Thraxan, then back to Arya, a low rumble building in its chest. "It's okay," Arya soothed, maintaining eye contact with the massive creature. "He's with me. We're all here to help you." The rumble subsided slightly as Arya took the tools from Thrax. She pulled on the specialized gloves, designed to withstand temperatures that would melt conventional materials, a necessary precaution when dealing with a creature that could generate plasma bursts as a defense mechanism. "Now comes the tricky part," she murmured, more to herself than to her companions. "I need to get close enough to grab that thing without startling you." She extended the container of bioattractant again, this time placing it on the ground directly in front of her. The drake's attention fixed on the offering, its massive head lowering further until its breath, hot as a furnace and smelling of ozone, washed over Arya's face. With the creature distracted, Arya carefully raised the micro-forceps toward the metal intrusion. She was close enough now to see that the device had barbed extensions that had deployed once inside the drake's nostril, anchoring it firmly in the sensitive flesh. Removing it would be painful, but leaving it in place would eventually kill the magnificent creature. "This is going to hurt," she whispered, "but I promise it will feel better afterward." Just as she was about to grasp the device, a sound cut through the rising wind, the unmistakable high-pitched whine of a gravitic engine. The drake's head jerked up, nearly knocking Arya backward as it released a warning roar that shook the clearing. "We've got company," Thrax announced, his disruptor already raised toward the tree line opposite their position. Through the gaps in the canopy, Arya could see a sleek, predatory craft descending toward the clearing. Unlike their research hovercraft, this vehicle bore no identifying markings, its hull a dull matte black designed to absorb rather than reflect sensor scans, the unmistakable profile of a poacher vessel. "It's them," she realized aloud. "They're coming back to finish what they started." The poacher craft settled at the edge of the clearing, its landing struts crushing the delicate moss beneath. The drake backed further against the fallen tree, its wings half extending in a threat display that sent cascades of sparks dancing across the scales. The craft's hatch hissed open, and 5 figures emerged, 4 armed with what appeared to be high-powered plasma rifles, flanking a central figure whose commanding presence immediately marked him as their leader. This 5th individual was tall and powerfully built, his face bearing the distinctive ridged bone structure of a Corvan, a species known throughout the galaxy for their skill as hunters. "Ah, the Alliance sends its pets to claim our prize," the leader called out, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "How thoughtful." Arya stood her ground, positioning herself between the poachers and the injured drake. "This creature is protected under Galactic Alliance Conservation Act 847. Your hunting activities here are illegal, and that device you've embedded in this drake violates at least 6 different statutes regarding humane treatment of sentient species." The Korvan laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. I am General Kral of the Korvan Hunting Lodge. Little human, your alliance laws mean nothing to me, especially out here in the frontier. That drake represents enough profit to buy a small moon, and I do not intend to leave without it. The drake stays where it is, Thrax declared, stepping forward to stand beside Arya. And you will surrender your weapons and submit to Alliance authority. Kral's eyes narrowed as he took in the Thraxan warrior. A Thraxan working with humans? How the mighty have fallen. Your ancestors would be ashamed to see you protecting their ancient enemies rather than hunting them as tradition demands. My people's relationship with the Drakes has always been more complex than outsiders understand. Thrax replied, his mandibles clicking in irritation. And unlike you, we never hunted them to extinction on our worlds. The tension in the clearing was palpable, broken only by the increasingly urgent beeping of Zane's weather scanner. The plasma storm is less than 5 minutes out, the engineer warned. If we don't find shelter soon, we'll all be in danger, Drake included. Kral gestured to his hunters. Take positions. I want clean shots at the creature's vital points. The neural disruptor should keep it docile enough for a clean kill. As the hunters spread out, Arya realized with horror what was about to happen. The device in the drake's nostril wasn't just causing pain. It was designed to prevent the creature from properly defending itself. The poachers had planned to return all along, waiting until the drake was weakened enough for an easy kill. Zane, Thrax, we can't let them do this, she urged, her mind racing for a solution. We're outnumbered and outgunned, Zane pointed out, though his hand had moved to the small pulse pistol at his side. And even if we could stop them, the storm, Arya repeated, a desperate plan forming in her mind. Apex drakes can navigate plasma storms. They use them to migrate across the continent. If I can remove that disruptor, the drake might be able to get us all to safety. Thrax considered this. A risky gambit, but perhaps our only option. Before Zane could voice further objection, Arya turned back to the drake. The creature was watching the poachers with wary intelligence. Its massive body tensed for fight or flight. She needed to act quickly before Kral and his hunters could position themselves for a killing shot. Cover me, she told her companions, and before either could stop her, she dashed toward the drake. Stop her, Kral bellowed, recognizing the threat to his plan. One of the hunters swung his rifle toward Arya, but Thrax was faster. The sonic disruptor pulsed, sending the hunter crumpling to the ground. Zane had drawn his pulse pistol and was firing covering shots that forced the other hunters to seek cover. Arya reached the drake, which was now watching the chaos with obvious confusion. It's okay, she soothed, reaching for the forceps she'd dropped earlier. I'm still going to help you. The drake lowered its head once more, whether out of trust or simple exhaustion. Arya couldn't tell, but it gave her the opening she needed. With one swift movement, she grasped the metal device with the forceps and pulled. The drake roared in pain as the barbed anchors tore free from the sensitive tissues. Blood, dark and slightly luminescent, splattered across Arya's suit, but she maintained her grip, continuing to pull until the entire device came free in a shower of sparks and fluid. I've got it, she called out triumphantly, holding up the blood-covered device. For a moment, the drake remained perfectly still, its eyes fixed on Arya with an unreadable expression. Then, slowly, it raised its massive head toward the storm-darkened sky. Its nostrils flared, free of obstruction for the first time in what must have been days, drinking in the plasma-charged air. "Kill it now!" Kral shouted, stepping forward with his own weapon raised. "Before it recovers." But the general's order came too late. The drake's eyes, previously clouded with pain, now burned with renewed clarity. It drew itself up to its full height, wings unfurling to reveal their full, majestic span. The plasma patterns across the wing membranes pulsed in time with the creature's accelerating heartbeat, visible on Arya's bioscanner. A hunter fired, the plasma bolt striking the drake's armored shoulder scales. Rather than penetrating, the energy seemed to be absorbed, the scales glowing briefly before the drake channeled the power through its body. And then it roared, not in pain this time, but in unmistakable fury. The sound was deafening, a physical force that rippled through the clearing. The poachers staggered backward, momentarily stunned by the acoustic assault. The drake took advantage of their disorientation, lunging forward with surprising speed for such a massive creature. Its tail swept in a devastating arc, catching two of the hunters and sending them flying into the underbrush. Kral recovered quickly, taking aim at the creature's more vulnerable neck region. "Stand your ground," he commanded his remaining hunter. "Concentrate fire on the throat." But before either could fire, the sky split open. The plasma storm had arrived, its initial shock wave bending the treetops nearly double. Forks of energy, not lightning, but pure ionized plasma, danced between clouds the color of bruises. The atmospheric disruption hit the clearing like a physical blow, knocking humans and aliens alike to the ground. All except the drake. The creature stood firm against the storm's fury, its wings now fully extended, the plasma patterns glowing brighter as they somehow interacted with the natural energy cascading from the sky. It was a breathtaking sight, primordial and terrifying in its beauty. Arya struggled to her feet, fighting against the storm's pull. "The drake!" she shouted over the howling wind. "It's drawing power from the storm." Indeed. The creature seemed to be growing stronger with each passing moment, its scales now pulsing with internal light that matched the rhythm of the storm above. It turned its gaze toward Kral, who was still attempting to aim his weapon despite the chaotic conditions. With a sound like thunder, the drake expelled a concentrated burst of plasma from its mouth, not at Kral, but at the poacher's vessel. The craft's shields flared briefly before collapsing, allowing the plasma to melt through the hull like paper. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as its power systems overloaded. "No!" Kral howled, watching as his means of escape was reduced to molten slag. He turned his fury on Arya. "This is your doing, human. You've ruined everything." He raised his weapon, aiming not at the drake now, but at Arya herself. Thrax shouted a warning, too far away to intervene. Zane fired his pulse pistol, but the shot went wide in the storm's turbulence. Time seemed to slow for Arya as she watched the Korvan's finger tighten on the trigger. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact that would end her life. But it never came. Instead, a massive shadow fell over her, accompanied by a wall of heat. She opened her eyes to find the drake standing protectively between her and Kral, its massive body absorbing the plasma bolt that had been meant for her. The scales where the bolt had struck glowed briefly before the energy was once again channeled through the creature's body. Kral fired again and again, each shot absorbed by the drake with seemingly no effect. The creature watched the Korvan with what Arya could only describe as contempt, waiting until his weapon's charge was depleted before making its move. With deliberate precision, the drake lowered its head and gently, for a creature of its size, pushed Kral to the ground with its snout. The general landed hard, his weapon skittering away across the moss. Before he could recover, the drake placed one massive clawed foot on his chest, pinning him in place without crushing him. The message was clear. The hunter had become the hunted. The storm intensified around them, the plasma discharges now striking the clearing with increasing frequency. Arya knew they had minutes at most before the full fury was upon them, a force that not even an apex drake could withstand indefinitely. "We need shelter," she called to Zane and Thrax, who had managed to regroup despite the chaos. "The research outpost is too far. We'll never make it back through the forest in this." The drake, still pinning Kral to the ground, turned its head toward Arya. Its plasma-bright eyes studied her for a long moment before it made a decision. It removed its foot from the Corvan's chest and instead grasped the back of his armored hunting suit in its teeth, lifting the protesting general as easily as a cat might carry a kitten. With its other foreclaw, it gestured, there was no other word for the deliberate movement, toward its own back. "I think," Thrax said with reverent wonder, "it is offering us transportation." Arya stared in disbelief. "It wants us to ride it?" "The ancient texts speak of such partnerships." Thrax confirmed, his usually stoic demeanor giving way to excitement. "But there have been no verified accounts for centuries." The drake rumbled impatiently, lowering its body to make access to its back easier. Outside the clearing, trees were beginning to splinter under the storm's assault. They were out of time and options. "Let's go," Arya decided, climbing carefully onto the creature's back. The scales were warm to the touch, but not uncomfortably so, and they provided natural handholds that made securing her position surprisingly easy. Thrax followed, his expression one of reverent awe as he settled behind Arya. Zane hesitated only briefly before joining them, muttering something about career choices and hazard pay as he climbed aboard. Once they were all secured, the drake, with Krell still dangling from its jaws, spread its magnificent wings and launched itself skyward with a powerful thrust of its hind legs. The sudden acceleration pushed Arya back against Thrax, but she quickly adjusted, leaning forward to reduce resistance as the drake climbed toward the storm-ravaged sky. "This is insane," Zane shouted over the wind. "It's flying directly into the storm." And indeed, the drake was ascending straight toward the heart of the plasma maelstrom. But rather than being buffeted by the chaotic energies, the creature seemed to navigate between the discharges with impossible precision, its wings adjusting to catch currents that were invisible to human perception. Through her bioscanner, Arya could see that the drake's nervous system was operating at extraordinary levels, processing information at speeds that rivaled the most advanced Alliance computers. The plasma patterns on its wings were not merely decorative but functional, sensory organs that allowed it to perceive and interact with the storm in ways science had never documented. "It's not just surviving the storm," she realized aloud. "It's using it." The drake banked sharply, riding a powerful updraft that carried them above the worst of the turbulence. From this vantage point, Arya could see the full extent of the storm, a swirling vortex of energy that stretched for kilometers in every direction. The forest below was a dark mass, occasionally illuminated by plasma strikes that set individual trees ablaze before the torrential rain extinguished the flames. The drake continued its flight, seemingly guided by some internal compass. Krall had ceased his struggles, hanging limply from the creature's jaws, whether from fear or resignation. Arya couldn't tell. After several minutes of flight, a structure became visible through the storm haze, the distinctive silhouette of the research outpost, its protective dome glowing faintly as it repelled the storm's energy. With remarkable precision, the drake descended toward the outpost's landing pad. As they approached, Arya could see personnel rushing about, some pointing defensive weapons toward the incoming creature before recognizing the human passengers on its back. The landing was surprisingly gentle, the drake touching down with the delicacy of a creature a fraction of its size. It carefully lowered Krall to the ground before allowing its 3 other passengers to dismount. Outpost security personnel quickly surrounded the Corvan general, confiscating the remaining weapons and restraining him despite his protests. Arya barely noticed, her attention fixed on the drake that had saved their lives. "Thank you," she said, approaching the massive head that now lowered to her level. "You were magnificent." The drake rumbled softly, a sound that vibrated through Arya's chest. Its plasma-bright eyes studied her with undeniable intelligence before it gently nudged her with its snout, a gesture that nearly knocked her off her feet despite its apparent restraint. "I think it likes you," Zane observed, keeping a respectful distance, though like might be an understatement for saving your life. Thrax approached, performing a complex gesture with his upper limbs that Arya recognized as a traditional Thraxon sign of respect. "My ancestors would call this a life bond," he explained. "By Thraxan understanding, you and this Drake are now connected through honor and blood." The outpost's chief administrator, a stern-faced woman named Director Voss, pushed through the gathering crowd of scientists and security personnel. "Dr. Sun," she said, her tone a mixture of relief and exasperation. "When you requested permission to approach an injured apex Drake, you failed to mention you'd be returning with it as a mount." Arya smiled, still watching the Drake as it calmly surveyed its new surroundings. "I don't think anyone could have predicted this outcome. Director, including me. Well, the Alliance Conservation Bureau will have a field day with this." Voss sighed. "An apex Drake voluntarily interacting with humans? It rewrites everything we thought we knew about these creatures." "Not everything," Thrax corrected. "My people have understood the true nature of Drakes for generations. Perhaps it is time for the Alliance to listen to indigenous knowledge rather than dismissing it as myth." Director Voss had the grace to look chastened. "Point taken, Specialist Thrax. I'll ensure your people's expertise is centered in our updated protocols." She turned her attention to the restrained Korvan. "As for General Kral, he'll be facing serious charges: poaching protected species, unauthorized use of neural disruptors, attempted murder of Alliance personnel. The list goes on." Kral glared at them all, his pride clearly wounded more than his body. "The Korvan hunting lodge has connections throughout the galaxy. This will not stand." "It already has," Arya replied calmly. "And given that your activities were recorded by my bioscanner, I'd say your hunting days are over. General," as if to emphasize her point, the Drake released another rumbling growl, this one distinctly threatening as it fixed its gaze on Kral. The Korvan, despite his bluster, took an involuntary step backward. "Take him to the holding cells," Director Voss ordered the security team, "and contact Alliance enforcement. I want him off my outpost as soon as the storm passes." As Kral was led away, still protesting his importance, Arya turned her attention back to the Drake. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she could properly examine the creature's injuries. The nostril where the disruptor had been embedded was still bleeding slightly, and several scales along its flank showed damage from previous encounters with the poachers. "I need my full medical kit," she told Zane, "and access to the outpost's xenobiology lab. Those injuries need proper treatment." "You want to bring an apex Drake inside the outpost?" Zane asked incredulously. Director Voss intervened before Arya could respond. "That won't be necessary. Dr. Sun, we can convert Landing Bay 3 into a temporary treatment area. It's large enough to accommodate our guest." Arya nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Director. I'll need assistance familiar with plasma-based physiology and full access to the outpost's medical supplies." "You'll have whatever you need," Voss assured her. "This is unprecedented research opportunity." As the Director moved away to make the necessary arrangements, Arya approached the Drake once more. It watched her with those intelligent eyes, seeming to understand that more help was coming. "I'm going to call you Emberwing," she decided, reaching out to gently touch the scales near its jaw. "It suits you, I think." The newly named Emberwing rumbled again, this time at a frequency that Arya's scanner identified as associated with contentment in similar species. The creature was accepting both its name and her continued care. 3 days later, Arya stood on the outpost's observation platform, watching as Emberwing soared through the clear post-storm skies. The Drake's injuries had responded well to treatment, and it had remained near the outpost rather than returning to the depths of the forest. Each morning, it would appear at the landing pad, waiting patiently for Arya to emerge for their now routine flight over the forest canopy. "The tracking data is extraordinary," Zane commented, reviewing the holographic display that showed Emberwing's flight patterns. It's established a territory that encompasses the outpost, effectively claiming us as part of its domain. Protection, not possession, Thrax corrected, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. In Thraxan culture, such behavior would indicate the Drake has accepted responsibility for the outpost's safety. Arya smiled as she watched Emberwing execute a complex aerial maneuver that sent rainbows dancing through lingering storm moisture. Whatever the motivation, the research opportunities are incredible. We're documenting behaviors that have never been formally observed in apex drakes. And you've become quite the celebrity, Zane added, gesturing to the communication console that had been continuously blinking with incoming messages since news of their adventure had reached Alliance headquarters. The Drake Whisperer. They're calling you. Arya made a face. I prefer scientist to folk hero. Thank you very much. How about Thorn Puller? Thrax suggested with uncharacteristic humor. My people have an ancient tale about a healer who removed a thorn from a predator's paw and gained a lifelong protector. The parallels are striking. Before Arya could respond, Director Voss joined them on the platform. Dr. Sun, I've just received word from Alliance Command. They've officially designated Emberwing as a galactic heritage species representative. The Drake and the surrounding forest will receive the highest level of protection under Alliance law. That's wonderful news, Arya said, genuinely pleased. And Kral, facing multiple life sentences on a penal colony, Voss confirmed. His hunting lodge is being investigated for similar operations on other frontier worlds. It seems your encounter has opened a significant crack in the poaching networks. Emberwing circled back toward the platform, its massive wings creating gusts of wind as it hovered momentarily before settling onto the reinforced landing area. The Drake lowered its head toward Arya, now a familiar greeting between them. There's more, Voss continued, watching the interaction with fascination. Command was impressed with how you handled the situation. They're establishing a new division focused on protecting vulnerable apex species from poaching operations, and they want you to lead it. Arya looked up in surprise. Me? The three of you. Actually, Voss clarified, nodding to include Zane and Thrax. Your complementary skills proved effective in this crisis. They're calling it the Thorn Pullers Division. Apparently someone in PR has a flair for the dramatic. Thrax's compound eyes glittered with amusement. I may have suggested the name in my official report. Arya laughed, reaching out to stroke Emberwing's scales. The Drake rumbled contentedly, the vibration running through her palm and up her arm. The Thorn Pullers. I like it, and I suspect this magnificent creature would approve as well. As if in response, Emberwing raised its head toward the horizon, where the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. The Drake released a call unlike any Arya had heard before, haunting and complex, carrying for kilometers across the forest. And to everyone's astonishment, it was answered. From different directions came responding calls, 2, then 3, then more. Each unique but clearly of the same species. Emberwing called again, the patterns on its wings pulsing with excitement. More apex drakes, Arya whispered in wonder. They're communicating. No, Thrax said softly, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his voice. They're calling for help. Listen to the pattern. It's the same vocalization Emberwing made when we found it injured. Arya's eyes widened as she understood the implications. They're injured too. More poacher traps. Seems like the Thorn Pullers have their work cut out for them, Zane observed, already moving toward the equipment storage to prepare for new expeditions. Emberwing lowered its massive head once more, those intelligent eyes fixed on Arya with what could only be described as expectation. It was asking for her help, not just for itself this time, but for its kind. Arya placed her hand on the Drake's snout, feeling the heat and power contained within the magnificent creature. Don't worry, she promised. We'll help them all. The Drake rumbled in satisfaction, And Arya knew that this was just the beginning of a partnership that would change humanity's understanding of these creatures forever. Somewhere out in that vast forest, more drakes were waiting, proud, powerful, and in need of someone willing to pull the thorns from their wounds. And Arya's son, xenobiologist and newly appointed leader of the Thorn Pullers, was ready for the challenge.